Welcome to Mystery of the Soul. I'm your co-host, Erin, and I'm joined by Abby and Leo, who are both psychic mediums. Our podcast explores the depth of the soul, the spiritual, and the supernatural.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Leo. Hi.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, Erin. Hi, Leo.
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Not too bad.
Here we
Just
are
hanging.
with our first episode.
I know. Are you excited?
We're gonna try not to screw it up.
I have my coffee.
You do. We're not going to screw it up. We're not. So for our listeners, Abby and Leo are both psychic mediums. This is Erin speaking. I am not a psychic medium. Maybe the best place to start is to let Leo talk a little bit about what he thinks a psychic medium is. And then Leo, maybe you could tell us a bit about your clairs and what they mean, because that's like a really good foundation, I think, for people who will follow our podcast.
Okay. So how my interpretation of a psychic medium is, the psychic part is a psychic medium is able to kind of pick up and read someone else's energy that you're with or next to. It's not necessarily having to have them next to you either, because you can read somebody's energy over the phone or from a distance. So the psychic part is reading someone else's energy that's here, like in our material world. The medium part is the connection that the psychic medium makes with the spirit realm. So the medium has to raise their vibration up higher. The spirit realm has to bring theirs down to the mediums, and they meet, and then they blend energies. And then at that point, spirit can relay messages and information to the medium, at which the medium can be the bridge and communicate those messages and that information to the person or the sitter.
Awesome. And what clairs do you have? Well, what is a clair, and what clairs do you have?
So a clair, like, we have our physical senses, you know, like our seeing, our hearing, our smelling, our touch. I don't know if I'm missing any, but the clairs are kind of like beyond that, going into like our sixth sense. So we have like, it's almost like an energy sense per se. So there's clairvoyance that a lot of people have heard that term in the past. Generations ago, a lot of people would refer to psychics as a clairvoyant, and means clear seeing, so seeing in their mind's eye. Clairaudient is clear hearing, so that would be like hearing in your mind. It's kind of like hearing a song or song lyrics stuck in your head, or hearing or remembering a conversation in your head. That's how it kind of comes across. It's not like right here next to you. It's kind of like internal. There's also clairsentience, which is clear feeling. So unlike physical touch with our hands, the clairsentience is more on an energetic level. It's more of like an internal feeling, like picking up on, could be like feeling emotions from the spirit realm. We can also psychically pick up on emotions of someone we're with. That's a few of them. There's many more that we can kind of look up and talk about, but those are the major ones that most people are aware of. I personally, when I connect with spirit or I connect psychically, I use clairvoyance. I utilize the clairaudience. I utilize the clairsentience. The other one I couldn't think of is claircognizance. So that's so that's the clear knowing. And so it's just kind of like a thought drops in, and it's not something you created. It's something you just know.
Yep. So Abby, I'm going to ask you about your clairs. Before you answer, I want to pause for a quick second. We'll talk about this later during our podcast, but for those of us who obviously are brand new and don't know Abby's background, she is an oral cancer survivor. And so part of her recovery included reconstructive surgery. So she has a speech impediment. So I just want to thank our listeners for being patient. And if you have any questions about our notes, you can read the full transcript in our show notes. But I think that's an important preface. So anyway, Abby, tell us about your four clairs.
Well, I have all four, but it really started with the feelings there. That was my first one, and that went on for a little bit, and then eventually, after I became really good using that clair, I got the next clair, and that was probably, I think it was my third hearing one, audience, so it was two things. And then once that I developed that one, I went up again and I would get the next clair, which was the one where you're seeing things, but you're not seeing it with your eyes. You see it
Like clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance, yeah. You see it in your head. For me, it sort of looks like a little movie screen. That people can pop in from the right and pop in from the left. It's almost like somebody took a picture, showed you see kind of fast, and then took it away. So then I was at that one. So I do have all four. I've had all four for several years now. But I guess it wasn't always easy for me when all of my clairs developed because I didn't know what was happening.
It was a little weird.
What? Like, what is going on?
I thought I was losing my mind. So, literally, after probably a year or so, I finally decided that, I gotta tell somebody about this. And, not a doctor, because I know I'm not, I'm not losing my mind. I need to tell somebody, in my family, this is happening to me. And I told my sister Erin.
That's me.
So yep. I told Erin, I was like, hey, what's up? So I'm talking to some dead people over here. What am I doing about it? And Erin was just wonderful when I told her. She didn't judge me at all. She thought it was fascinating. And I think in many ways she helped me sort of grow my abilities because she's been, so supportive of them. Which brings me to the next point. While I had these abilities, I still didn't know what the heck I was supposed to do with them.
No, you were a hot mess. I'm sorry.
So I needed help, man.
Yeah.
And I asked the universe, and my grandmother was speaking to me. She had passed on before I was born, and telling me you need a mentor, you need help, Abby. So I asked the universe. I said, hey, I really need a mentor or somebody to help me out and guide me and tell me what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And I think that will get into my next story of how we all met. And you want to start maybe talking about your friend?
Yeah. So, Abby was as this gift was opening up, for me watching her, obviously I've known her whole life. And we'll talk later, and you can read certainly on our website more about Abby's background. But Abby's had basically a lifetime that's fraught with illness, right? And she's been perpetually sick. She's probably had a couple near-death experiences in life. And then she's a cancer survivor. So when she told me that she was chatting it up with dead people, which is how we joke about the fact that she communicates with spirit, it didn't surprise me because I was like, okay, in some way she's gotten so close to that veil, right? And like something cracked open, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
this is working. So I wasn't surprised at all. But what Abby eventually needed was someone who could offer guidance because they knew how, like, they knew the experience themselves, right? And they were like a professional in this capacity, which is far beyond what I was capable of doing. And so I had been hounding Abby, like, you need to figure out how to set boundaries up, right? Like, you are not 24/7 open to spirit and messages. And so she and I have been having this conversation. And then one day I was chatting with a friend of mine, Vanessa, and I told my friend Vanessa about my sister and her capabilities. And I'd started opening up in my life to people that I knew and explaining this. And Vanessa was fascinated and listened. And that was really it. Until a couple weeks later, I got a text from her that basically said she knows a friend of a friend who's a professional psychic medium, and this person would probably be a good fit to help my sister, Abby. And this person is Leo. So,
Hi.
so Leo, this friend of a friend was someone that you knew, right? Crystal. So why don't you
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about
Yeah.
Crystal?
So my end of the story, how it kind of came together, is your friend and my wife's friend Crystal. Crystal got into bird watching over COVID because, there was a lot of things we couldn't do indoors. So she kind of got into that hobby, and she traveled different places and went different states even to go birding. So she had a trip coming up that she was going to go from New York City to Maine, and I live in Massachusetts. And so she had said to my wife, do you mind on my way there if I stop over and spend a couple days with you guys? And we're like, sure, yeah, come on, and we'll spend a couple days together. So as she was visiting, I got a chance to talk to Crystal, and we talked about like the psychic mediumship stuff that I did, and she was very curious about it. And not surprisingly, that I ended up doing a reading for her while she was there. And so a lot of stuff came through for her, but a lot of stuff came through for other people that weren't there but were connected to her. And so after that, she finished our visit maybe the next day, and then she went on to Maine. She went on to her birding, and she was hanging out with Erin's friend, Vanessa. And I believe it was at that point, I think Crystal had been talking about her experience with the reading with me, with Vanessa, and Vanessa thought to herself, and I don't remember if she said it to Crystal or not. I think she did, maybe, like, do you think that your friend's husband would be interested in helping Erin's sister? And Crystal was like, well, let me see, I'll ask him. And so it was a couple weeks later, after Crystal had left, I got a text from her, and she said, had a great time birding. She said, a lot of the stuff that didn't make sense in the reading when I was there actually made sense later, and I had some stuff validated. But she says, I have a friend that, this friend was Vanessa, but she says, like, my friend has a friend, and their sister, who is Abby, started developing her psychic mediumship, but is feeling like really overwhelmed and could use some help. And would you be interested in helping? And so I responded back, sure, absolutely, I wouldn't mind at all. And I gave my information. Crystal passed it on, I think, I don't know if Vanessa passed it on to you, Erin, Raby, and then it got to Abby. Abby, decided when she was ready, she reached out to me and said, this is who I am, this is what's going on, would you consider chatting about that? And we decided that yeah, I wanted to, and we scheduled a Zoom meeting, and we talked a lot about what her experiences were. She was being really overwhelmed with like spirit 24/7, not just at
Mm-hmm.
home, but like in the supermarkets or anywhere else she was going.
I
And
was
so
very
we,
at the
right,
house.
yeah, and you were actually really very anxious also.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things that I actually did with you is we actually did some distant Reiki over Zoom to get you calm.
Yeah. Which was wonderful.
And so we got you a little calmer, and then we were able to actually talk about boundaries. And so we talked about boundaries, how, you know, when we set boundaries in the real world with either our circle of friends or family, if we're good at that, we can be good at setting boundaries with the spirit realm. But if we're not so good with it in the real world, it can be a challenge with setting boundaries with the spirit realm. But
Right.
if you need to kind of draw a line so that you're not getting bombarded. And so we talked about how to set boundaries. We also talked about energy protection and how to create a bubble around yourself. So
I
when you
remember that.
were in the supermarket, you weren't feeling everybody's stuff.
Yep, I had put my bubble up in my
Right.
pajamas.
Right.
So
And
one thing,
are you still doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Erin.
sometimes you forget to put your bubble up, Abby, and
Okay.
sometimes you forget. So one thing I wanted to jump in about, because Leo, this is my favorite part of your connection with Crystal, and it's a beautiful validating part, so I don't want to forget telling this part of the story, which was when you were reading for Crystal, you brought up that she has a friend from Richmond, Virginia. And Crystal
right.
at the time didn't know who that was, right? That was that one piece of information that in the moment didn't make sense. That person from Richmond, Virginia was Vanessa. So,
Gotcha.
right? So you knew it. So this might be a good part in the story, and I'm sure Abby wants to jump in, but to talk about our guides, right?
And
so
I can
Abby,
tell
I'm
you
gonna
right now, my guides are lighting me up right now. I've got the chills and up and down my body.
Yeah, I bet a few people here too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about hanging
So
out
good-
with psychic mediums.
Well, so the other thing that was sort of interesting about all of this is, so when I asked the universe, right, for help with all the gifts, I asked, and it was only 2 days later, that Leo showed up. I mean, we're not talking about a month or two here. It was like days. And it was really funny because my older sister Erin came to visit me, and we were just hanging out at my house, and she randomly takes out a piece of paper, and she's like, "Yep, so this is the number for Leo. You have to give him a call." And I was looking at this piece of paper, and I'm like, "Thanks, universe." And it was when I spoke to Leo, remember from phone Leo, we talked for like a good hour or so, and we got to know each other. And what I thought was so amazing is that this was like meant to be. Like Leo was supposed to be my mentor, because our backgrounds and about our gifts are very similar. We were not born mediums. This sort of just happened to us. In life during difficult times. And so we have a lot of similarities like that. And that wasn't a coincidence. That was because it was meant to be. Because our guides and our spirit helpers smashed us up and said, these two can help each other out.
That's a good example of divine timing.
Yep. Can you tell us what divine timing is?
Yeah, I think it's just like if you think of like, you're waiting for something to happen and you need something to happen really bad, and you want it to happen now, but it's not going to happen when you want it. But then when it actually happens, it's like when you needed it to happen.
Yeah. I've always sort of like, I've said this a lot, in the past year, that there's no such thing as a coincidence. That is like my interpretation of divine timing too.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sometimes you can ask the universe for things, and they'll give it to you.
When you need it. They'll give it to you when you need it most. Yeah.
They'll give it to you when you need it. Yep.
And the other thing too is you can ask for something that you think you need, but what you ask for might not actually be what you need. And so the universe will actually give you what you need, not what necessarily you asked for.
Yep.
So we talked about spirit guides, and some of our listeners might know already what that means, but for a listener who doesn't necessarily know what a spirit guide is and therefore doesn't quite understand what we were just relaying, Leo, will you talk a little bit about your definition of what a spirit guide is?
Yeah, I think spirit guides can be a few different things. There's different opinions about it. Spirit guides could be like a past loved one. It also could be like beings that were never physically here on Earth, but part of the spiritual realm and part of our collective team. And, there's certain spirit guides to help us with certain things. A lot of us have a main spirit guide that is with us from the time we're born until death. And, they help us all the time. Sometimes we realize it. Sometimes we don't even know. And, I connect with my guides all the time. I know you do also, Abby.
Yeah.
And, I've only been given one name for one of my guides, but I don't know the names of all my other guides, but it honestly doesn't even really matter.
Yeah.
Because I trust in the universe, I trust in the process, and then I trust in my own abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that helps.
Is that helpful?
And then, yeah, and a guardian angel is part of your spirit team, right? Because guardian angel is probably a pretty colloquial term, like most people know what that means.
Yeah, I think everybody has heard about a guardian angel,
Yeah. And so they're typically on your team, amongst others.
Yeah, and guardian angels could be, an angel from the spiritual realm, but a guardian angel also could be a past loved one too.
Yep.
And I feel like you can have more than one also.
So we're probably talking about that term a lot, is our spirit teams, right? I think that's what you and I refer to it there, right? It's like a team of people.
Yeah.
As our spirit guides.
Yeah, I talk about my guides all the time, just, because I do, besides this type of work that I do, I'm also a massage therapist. And so during my massage sessions, a lot of times my guides will have conversations with me, and the conversations aren't external. They're actually in my mind, and it's almost like telepathic, like mind to mind.
Mm-hmm. How many guides do you have, Leo?
I honestly don't know. And, I don't know that it matters.
Yeah. Because I know some people might ask that, like, do you only have one guide? Do you have more than that? In my experience, I know I have one, absolutely.
What my experience is, in the community, spiritual community, is the belief is you do at least have that one main spirit guide that you're born with.
Yep.
But then, Abby, you also have you have our grandmother too, right?
Right. So you'll probably hear me talk about my main spirit side in the series. This is my grandmother, who I've never met before. She passed away years before I was born. But she's been my main spirit guide from the minute I was born up until right now. And I talk to her all the time, every day. Yep.
Well, she's been pretty instrumental in your journey.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Also,
Yep,
she's hilarious.
She is hilarious. And she was the one yelling at me saying, "You need to get a mentor, Abby." So I have to listen to her. And I did, and that's how I met Leo, and then I introduced my sister Erin to Leo, and we decided to create this series for everybody, because we're going to share our experiences with you.
Yeah, I think Abby, you first of all, our grandmother's name for our listeners who will keep hearing it come up. Her name is Florence, and that's Abby's primary guardian, and she is very funny and very vocal and has lots of personality. And it's been amazing getting to know her through my sister. But I think once that, Abby, you got a hold of Leo and Leo started helping you, maybe reconcile is the right word, this gift, right? And control it or work with it more productively instead, maybe work with it more productively instead of control it, right? It really opened a lot of doors for you. And that's when you first started saying, hey, maybe I want to do a podcast or some sort of medium where I can share all of this beauty and all of this magic and all of this wisdom that I've acquired from the other side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So that's when, So that's when we reached out to Leo. You reached out to Leo, Abby, and you were like, hey, I want to do this thing.
Yeah. I think, well, what it was is, I think it was maybe, it might be now 3 months ago or something like that, maybe, that you sent me a text and you had been listening to a couple of my podcasts, and you had said, would you ever consider doing a podcast episode together to talk about how we met, because it was kind of unique and it was a unique situation. And I said, yeah, I think we should. And so we scheduled a Zoom meeting. You know, you and I talked. You talked about like your current medical situation. We talked about some ideas that we thought would be good material to talk about. But then I said to you, I think this is actually more than just one episode. I think there's a lot going on here. So I said, let's reconvene and talk again. And then when we rescheduled, you had said my sister Erin would like to join us. And, you know, you said, you know, she's very involved with you and likes to help you out and wanted to help out in any way with the project. And so I think once the three of us got together, I think our energies clicked really well. And I think we all realized that this was just bigger than what we could see in front of us.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, than what we first thought it would be. Right.
Yeah.
Abby, is there anything else about how we met Leo that I forgot, or about your backstory that we should share? Did I forget anything?
I mean, the only thing that I think Leo and I should sort of talk about and relate to a little bit about is, you know how they said that, like, Leo was, like, personally picked to, I think, be my mentor, to help me out, and I think, that was for a very special reason, because, like I said before, our backgrounds are sort of similar. I've had a lot of health problems over my lifetime, and really my abilities as a psychic medium sort of like blew up when I had my most challenging health problem, which was cancer. And Leo also had sort of a similar situation.
Yeah, mine wasn't physical. Mine was more mental health crisis.
Yep.
And so I can talk a little bit on that if you want.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that story, Leo.
So So it was back in like 2011. I had kind of a psychotic break, and I was in the hospital for a few days, had some testing and all kinds of scans done and stuff like that. And they thought it was a one-time thing, but there was definitely like some chemical imbalances going on, but also um, looking back from back then to now, I can see where being familiar with the chakras, energy centers connected to our mind, body, and spirit, and the upper ones especially that are connected to like the universe, spirit, intuition stuff, those upper chakras kind of blew wide open, and they were wide open, and I was receiving so much I guess feedback from the universe, spirit realm, and all that, along with the chemical imbalances. It was tough to manage without figuring out along the way with my mental health journey that I needed to be on medication. I also do therapy. I also use Reiki. But it wasn't until that crisis happened. You know, as a kid growing up, I was very anxious, but it wasn't like that I saw spirits or ghosts or anything like that, or I didn't hear things necessarily, but I was very, that clairsentience feeling that we were talking about earlier. I was very sensitive to energy though, and feeling stuff in the room.
Like intuitive? You mean?
What's that?
Being very intuitive though?
Well, not even just intuitive, but actually, like when I was a kid in my room, you know, a lot of kids, they're scared of being in the dark, right? And
Yep.
when I was a kid, I was very anxious, very sensitive of the dark, and many times I would sleep with the covers over my head because I could just feel like just everything coming at me, and I didn't want to uncover my head because I was afraid what was going to be there.
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah.
was, yeah, and I even slept with a nightlight as a kid up until probably like I was 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's another
so
similarity that we have.
yeah, so but it wasn't until after the mental health crisis that after I got things under control and regulated with medication and therapy, and then my journey started to turn in the direction of like my abilities opening up when I got attuned to Reiki. And so when I got attuned to Reiki, it kind of really opens your chakras up, and you become more of an open channel. And when you become more of an open channel, those other clair senses that we were talking about earlier tend to open up and evolve as well. And so that's what started happening. Is it started out with eventually me getting a name in my head. It's kind of like, you know, I heard this name over and over and over again, kind of like hearing like, you know, a song stuck in your head you can't get out of your head.
Yeah.
But I was working with a client, this name came up, they were a regular client, and I felt comfortable with them enough that I said, all right, I knew the potential for this to happen was there. So I just said to them, does this name, and the name was Nathan, I said, does Nathan mean anything to you, or do you have any connection to a Nathan? And they thought about it for a quick second, and they're like, yeah, I actually had a nephew that passed in a car accident a couple years ago. And I'm like, really? And she's like, is he here? And I'm like, I think so. And does he have a message? I don't know. I said, I think he just wants you to know he's here. He's okay. But that's how it started. I didn't know what I was doing. But I did know that I was sensing him. And,
Yeah.
you know, how I sort of evolved was one of the mediums that I used sort of as a mentor for myself to kind of study and evolve with my mediumship stuff was John Edward. And, people are familiar with him with the crossing over. And so I kind of followed a lot of his interviews and watched some of his episodes and watched how he worked. And as my clairsenses were opening more and more information was coming through, I decided to kind of take a gamble and take the risk of getting out of my comfort zone, and with the clients I was comfortable with, actually talking with them about it. And as I talked about it, the stuff that came out, they actually validated and made sense to them, and it didn't sound crazy to them. And so it didn't sound like it was something I was creating or making up. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is happening. And so, because it was happening, and because of my previous history with the mental health, I was a little nervous about things getting out of control, but I also had a strong pull that I wanted to follow it as well. And so while I was going to therapy, I decided that I was not going to hide it, like when I was, struggling with the mental illness before I got medicated. I would hide things. And so this time I knew this was like really important, and I didn't want to screw it up. And I knew, my wife, Robin, I put her through a lot through my struggle with mental health, and she was concerned about it as well. So I came up with a plan with my therapist to do check-ins and do sort of reality checks with me, and we would openly discuss, my experiences that I had with information coming through for clients. And, we talked about how it felt, and did I feel still grounded? Did I feel disassociated or anything like that? Was I still connected to reality? I was, but there was two separate things going on. I was still in reality, but I was still picking up on this stuff. And so I kept Robin, my wife, informed as things were kind of evolving. But it did scare her because, in the back of her mind, I know she was worried, was I getting sick again? And that's what I didn't want to have happen either. But my gut feeling, my intuition was saying, no, this is actually really happening. And so I wanted to follow it because it actually gave me more anxiety to try to suppress it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think one thing that's important to say, and the difference between what happened to Leo and what happened to Abby, is what happened to Abby was very physical illness, right? And Leo, the thing with mental illness is that it's invisible to other people unless they don't know, right? But I think it's important for our listeners to know how passionate we are about pursuing mental health wellness in the same way you would any sort of physical health wellness, right? And we're advocates here of removing the stigma behind any sort of mental health challenge, right? So, and that's really important to put out there, how passionate we are about that.
The best way you can remove stigma is talk about it like anything else, and make it normal. And one thing I will say that, there'll be people like in the spiritual community that won't agree with me, but I know for myself personally that I do need to be on medication to be regulated and to keep those chemicals in balance, because that actually allows me to be stable. It gives me a foundation to be stable and relaxed, so I actually can work with my abilities. So I've had people ask me, does that affect your abilities with being a psychic medium? And I'll say no, it hasn't stifled me at all.
Thank you for sharing, Leo, because I bet there are a lot of people listening to this that will find that comforting, right? Just you being transparent about your story. I mean, both your stories are beautiful in their own way. There's just more stigma behind mental illness. That's all that we want to break down. It's just, and totally remove.
You can't see it. You can't touch it. It's So it's unknown.
So it's unknown. So one of the funny things about hanging out with psychic mediums, and as someone who's not a psychic medium, I can attest to this, is you can be in a conversation with a psychic medium. And I ironically now have multiple friends. And I can see when you guys are getting a message because you do like your little head tilt. My sister will sometimes have like a spoon of yogurt still in her mouth, and I'll see her standing in the kitchen with the yogurt in her mouth.
Not
and I
saying
see her
anything.
like looking, not saying
Listen,
anything, and she'll like
right.
look up to the ceiling.
Oh,
So-
we're in my bathrobe, right?
I was just to admit that, but yes.
We're in my
In your bathroom.
Hmm.
And when I first started hanging out with Leo, I saw Leo do it too, albeit not in his bathrobe, but the same like up and out. So before we close out this segment, I want to ask you guys if you're getting any message from Spirit that you'd like to share right now before we move to the last segment of our podcast.
Good question.
They're both listeners, so you both know they're both doing that weird little head tilt. So let's give them a moment.
I just
Do you-
want to say
Go
thank
ahead.
you. I think. Thank you for listening to us today, and joining us. I really hope that you'll come back and listen more, because we have so many stories that we can share with you that I think you'll find really interesting, and wonderful to hear, and we're so excited to be able to share all of that with you. Leo?
I'm gonna leave it with that because I think that's great.
Okay.
That's beautiful. I love it. So, listeners, we would love to, as we progress in these series, we want to close each of our episode out with something that gives you hope or clarity or inspiration. We're calling this segment Feed Your Soul. So for Leo's going to take us through our first edition of Feed Your Soul. Leo, what are we going to do for our listeners?
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull an oracle card.
Oh,
So
this is fun.
So people have heard of tarot cards, and they've heard of oracle cards. Tarot cards are more of a fixed system, so there's suits to them, like playing cards. And oracle cards are more fluid, so they're very unique to the author that creates them, and they oftentimes have a theme. And tarot or oracle cards both are a divination tool. So what they are is a tool for spirit to use to communicate with us. And so you can look at tarot or the oracle cards as their language to use with us. So the oracle card deck that I'm going to pull from right now is the Oracle of Seven Energies. So if you're on the video, you might be able to see that. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. we
Yeah,
can see it.
okay. All right. So I'm just shuffling through the deck right now, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm just going to pull one card. And the one card I'm going to pull, we're just going to look at this as sort of a collective message for anybody that's listening now, or when you run across our episode, that timing of you listening to our episode, that divine timing that we talked about earlier, it was probably time for you to hear this message. So the card that I'm getting is, I don't know if you can see it, but it says Earth Magic.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, can you see the image on it, sort of?
Yeah. And Leo, you can take a photo after our session. I'm going to post it to Instagram for our listeners.
Oh, okay. All right. And you know, it's really funny because this one is called Earth Magic. It's someone standing on like literally the earth with their legs crossed, their bare feet. And it's actually the very first card of the deck. And I find what I'm getting my guides that they're actually saying is we're using the very first card for our very first episode.
Aw.
Look
I
at
love
Spirit.
And so I'm going to read from the guidebook what the author's interpretation of this message is. And so earth magic, what this card represents is being grounded in nature, the quiet, dark place where all things begin, where essence is first ignited before manifestation, knowing you are part of the earth and she is part of you. Earth magic speaks to the intrinsic relationship that you have, or that you and all living things have with the consciousness of the earth, also known as Gaia. Imagine the oak tree that begins its journey as an acorn, gathering the life force energy it needs from the earth so it can sprout up from the ground. Because you are part of nature, you follow the same cycle of manifestation. Everything you are, your evolution, and the successful manifestation of your dreams begin below the surface of the consciousness until an idea comes. Conviction takes hold and something meaningful can be planted. Be still for a moment. Quiet your thoughts and imagine anchoring your energy to the sacred quality of being part of this living earth. Do this mindfully to connect to this divine intelligence with the power to create the perfect form from the essence of a tiny spark of life. Indeed, this is miraculous. The message now is to trust that the seeds you've planted in the field of dreams are in good hands. The earth is a conscious, divine source of love that is doing its part on your behalf. Slow down, take in the beauty of your life now, and trust that what you are intending is being nourished and is growing. There will be plenty of time later to tend to your garden, to water it, and to weed it. Great magic is germinating underground, working its way to the surface to deliver more blessings than you could imagine. Let it.
That's a beautiful message.
I think that's
Yes.
a powerful message.
So, Leo, for our listeners, like I said, take a photo so we can post it on our Instagram so our followers can check out our Instagram. We're Mystery of the Soul podcast. So if you want to see an image of the oracle card that Leo pulled, we'll make sure you get a chance to take a look at it.
All right.
All
And
right,
then do
guys.
we have anything else?
I don't think so. Abby?
No. We're here.
All
All
right,
right.
listeners. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We hope to see you again soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.